The golden years revenge. How my ungrateful son kicked me out and lived to regret it. Get your things and get out. You have until the end of the week. Those were the exact words my son, my own flesh and blood, spoke to me on what had started as an ordinary Tuesday morning. His wife stood behind him, arms crossed, with that smug little smile I'd grown to despise over the last 5 years. I remember the steam still rising from my untouched coffee as I sat there, stunned into silence, trying to comprehend how 30 years of parental sacrifice had culminated in this moment. I should probably back up a bit. My name is Robert, and at 67, I never imagined I'd be facing homelessness because of my only child. After my wife Linda passed away from cancer 3 years ago, our son Michael had suggested I sell my house and move in with him, his wife Melissa, and their 2 children. "It makes financial sense, Dad," he'd explained with such convincing concern. "Property taxes are killing you, and we've got plenty of space in the basement suite. We can convert it into a nice little apartment for you." It seemed logical at the time. My 3-bedroom ranch-style home in the suburbs of Denver had become too much for me to maintain alone. The memories of Linda were everywhere. In the garden she'd lovingly tended, in the kitchen where she'd hummed while cooking Sunday dinners, in our bedroom where I still sometimes rolled over expecting to find her. The property taxes were indeed becoming a burden on my fixed income. So I agreed, sold the house for $410,000, and moved into Michael and Melissa's finished basement. The arrangement worked well enough at first. I saw my grandkids daily, helped with homework, and drove them to after-school activities while Michael and Melissa worked. I paid them $1,500 monthly for rent and utilities. More than fair, I thought, for a basement suite with a small kitchenette and bathroom. I also picked up groceries frequently and often prepared dinners for everyone. Financially, I had given Michael $100,000 from the house sale as a thank you for taking me in, which they immediately used to pay off their mortgage. But things began changing about 6 months in. Melissa started making comments about having a roommate at our age whenever her friends visited. My grandchildren were suddenly too busy to spend time with me. Michael began scrutinizing the groceries I purchased, questioning why I'd bought expensive orange juice or name-brand cereal. Then came the renovations. Michael and Melissa decided their 20-year-old kitchen needed an upgrade. Then it was the master bathroom that suddenly required Italian marble. Next came a backyard transformation with an elaborate deck and hot tub. Each time, there were not-so-subtle hints about how family helps family and pointed questions about what I was doing with my extra money from the house sale. What they didn't know, what I purposely never disclosed, was that I hadn't just been sitting on the remaining money from the house. Before Linda's death, we had lived well below our means and had successful investments. Additionally, I'd received a substantial life insurance payout after she passed. Between my pension, Social Security, and investment income, I was actually quite comfortable financially. The $1,500 I paid them monthly was pocket change compared to what I had quietly accumulated over the decades. I still remember the day Linda and I made our financial plan, sitting at our kitchen table 25 years ago. "We'll live like we're middle class even though we don't have to," she had said with that practical wisdom I always admired. "Nobody needs to know what we have." It became our little secret, and we took genuine pleasure in our modest lifestyle while watching our investments grow. The early days after moving in with Michael's family had given me hope. My grandchildren, Emma, 14, and Tyler, 11, seemed excited to have me around. I'd help Emma practice her volleyball serves in the backyard and listen to Tyler excitedly explain the intricacies of whatever video game had captured his attention that week. For a few months, the arrangement felt like a blessing, a chance to be present in their lives in a way I hadn't been able to when Michael was growing up and I was working 60-hour weeks as a mechanical engineer. Melissa had been welcoming too at first. She'd ask my advice about her garden or invite me to taste test her attempts at recreating Linda's recipes. "I want the kids to experience their grandmother's cooking, even if she's not here," she'd said, bringing tears to my eyes. Now I realized it was all performance, setting the stage to eventually access what she thought was my modest nest egg. The breaking point came when I overheard Michael and Melissa in their bedroom one night. I had gone upstairs for a glass of water, and their door was slightly ajar. "How much do you think he has left from the house?" Melissa asked. Has to be at least $250,000, Michael replied. He hardly spends anything except on groceries for us. We need to get access to that before he blows it on something stupid or gets taken advantage of. He's getting older, Michael. He's already getting confused about things. I know. I'm thinking we should suggest he add me to his accounts for protection, you know? If he resists, we might need to talk about power of attorney. Dad's not getting any younger. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The confusion Melissa referred to was a single incident where I'd misplaced my reading glasses, which I later found in the refrigerator where I'd absent-mindedly set them down while getting milk for my coffee. One senior moment, and they were already plotting to take control of my finances. I was neither confused nor in cognitive decline. But that conversation made one thing crystal clear. My son and his wife saw me as nothing more than a potential payday. The house I'd worked 30 years to pay off was gone, with a large chunk already in their pockets. Now they were plotting to get the rest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering where I had gone wrong as a parent. Had I spoiled Michael? Had I failed to teach him the value of family? Or was this Melissa's influence? The questions tormented me until dawn broke. I thought about Linda, about what she would say if she could see our son now. She had always been his defender, explaining away his self-centeredness as ambition and his occasional callousness as focus. Even on her deathbed, she made me promise to take care of our boy. I wonder if she somehow suspected that it would eventually be Michael who would need to take care of me, and that he would fail so spectacularly at the task. For 2 weeks, I said nothing while I made arrangements. I contacted an old friend who's a real estate agent and found a modest one-bedroom condo across town that I could move into immediately. I spoke with my financial advisor and ensured all my accounts were secure. I packed my most important possessions in small batches and stored them in my car trunk during the day when everyone was out. During those 2 weeks, I watched Michael and Melissa with new eyes. I noticed how they'd fall silent when I entered a room, how Melissa would sometimes take calls in the laundry room with the door closed, speaking in hushed tones, how Michael would study me when he thought I wasn't looking, as if assessing how much fight I had left in me. That I also noticed how they'd begun isolating me from my grandchildren. Grandpa's tired. They'd tell the kids when they wanted to show me something, let's not bother him right now. Or they'd schedule family outings on days when they knew I had doctor's appointments. Slowly but surely, they were erasing me from the family narrative. And then Michael and Melissa made their move. Sooner and more brutally than I anticipated. Dad, we need to talk about the future. Michael started during breakfast that fateful Tuesday. Melissa and I have been discussing our space needs. And with the kids getting older, we really need to convert the basement back into a rec room and guest space. I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. What Michael is trying to say, Melissa interjected with false sweetness, is that this living arrangement isn't working anymore, for any of us. We think it would be best if you looked into senior living options. And where would I go? I asked quietly. There's a nice assisted living facility about 20 minutes from here, Michael said, sliding a glossy brochure across the table. We toured it last weekend. It's affordable with your remaining savings and Social Security. I glanced at the brochure. The affordable facility was actually one of the worst rated in the area. I'd researched all of them after Linda's diagnosis, just in case her care had required it. The place had multiple violations for understaffing and medication errors. The rooms were tiny, shared spaces with curtain dividers instead of walls. This was where my son thought I belonged. And if I don't want to go there? I asked. That's when Michael's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, and he uttered those words, "Get your things and get out. You have until the end of the week." Melissa added, "We've already consulted with an attorney. This is our house, and legally we can evict you with proper notice." In that moment, I felt something inside me break. Not my heart that had already been cracking for months as I watched my son transform into a stranger. No, what broke was the chain of obligation, the sense that I needed to keep sacrificing for a son who clearly viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenience and a cash cow. I nodded slowly. I see. And what about the $100,000 I gave you when I moved in? That was a gift, Melissa snapped. There was no written agreement about it being contingent on anything. What she didn't know was that I had indeed documented the money as a conditional loan. Linda had taught high school English for 30 years, and one of her favorite lessons was on Polonius's advice in Hamlet, neither a borrower nor a lender be. But she always added her own corollary, and if you must lend, always get it in writing. I had followed her advice, having Michael sign acknowledgement that the funds were conditional on my long-term residency. The coldness in their eyes told me everything. In that moment, my own son became a stranger. I realized that the sweet little boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager whose heart I'd helped mend after his first breakup, the young man whose college education Linda and I had paid for in full, he was gone. In his place sat a cold, calculating adult who had clearly inherited none of the values we tried to instill. "All right," I said simply. "I'll be gone by Friday." The shock on their faces was minimal but noticeable. They'd clearly expected begging, crying, or anger, anything but calm acceptance. I finished my coffee, stood up, and went downstairs to pack. What followed were 3 days of intensified manipulation. Michael and Melissa alternated between guilting me after all we've done for you, threatening me, "We can make this much harder if you force us," and false concern, "We're just worried about your ability to care for yourself." My grandchildren, clearly coached by their parents, suddenly became affectionate again, asking tearfully why Grandpa was leaving. Emma, my teenage granddaughter, caught me alone on Thursday evening. "Grandpa," she whispered, "are you really leaving because you want to, or because Mom and Dad are making you?" I couldn't bring myself to tell her the full truth, that her parents were essentially throwing me out after taking a substantial chunk of my money. Instead, I said, "Sometimes adults have different ideas about what's best. Your parents need their space back, and I need to have my own place again." "Is it because of the fighting?" she asked, surprising me. "What fighting, sweetheart?" "I hear Mom and Dad arguing about money all the time. Mom wants a new SUV even though Dad says they can't afford it. And last week they were fighting about your money." Out of the mouths of babes. I hugged her tight and promised I'd still see her often, though I had my doubts about whether Michael and Melissa would allow it. On Friday morning, I called a cab. I had already moved most of my important possessions to my new condo. Michael and Melissa watched with thinly veiled impatience as I loaded just 2 suitcases into the taxi. "That's all you're taking?" Michael asked, suddenly concerned about appearances as neighbors watched from their windows. "It's all I need," I replied. "Where will you go?" he asked, now seemingly worried that his homeless father might become a neighborhood talking point. I just smiled. "Don't worry about me." "Dad, if this is about money," he started, likely realizing that evicting me might mean the end of my financial contributions. "Goodbye, Michael. Tell the kids I love them." The taxi pulled away and I didn't look back. I directed the driver to my new address, a modern condo in a secure building with a doorman located in one of the most desirable areas of the city. As we drove, I made 2 calls. The first was to my attorney, instructing him to send a legal demand for the return of the $100,000 I had given Michael, with documentation proving it had been a conditional loan for housing, not a gift. The second call was to cancel all the automatic payments I'd been making for their family cell phone plan, streaming services, and the children's extracurricular activities, little things they hadn't even realized I'd been quietly paying for years. The taxi driver, a man about Michael's age, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Finally, he asked, "Rough day, sir?" "Actually," I replied with genuine realization, "I think this might be the first day of the rest of my life." He laughed. "That's the spirit." My new home was smaller than the house I'd shared with Linda, but it was mine, and it had an incredible view of the city skyline. The building had a fitness center, a community room, and weekly social activities. Within days, I'd met more new people than I had in years living in Michael's basement. The first night in my new place was strange. After 3 years of living with family noise, footsteps overhead, teenagers playing music, the constant hum of activity, the silence was almost deafening. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights, and felt a profound sense of both loss and liberation. I spent that first week settling in and processing what had happened. I found myself cycling through emotions: grief for the relationship I thought I had with my son, anger at being used and discarded, fear about starting over at my age, and underneath it all, a slowly growing sense of excitement about what might come next. On the 8th day, I woke up and decided it was time to start living again. I joined a senior hiking group, signed up for photography classes at the community college, and volunteered at the local literacy center. I started exploring restaurants in my new neighborhood, eating cuisines Linda and I had never tried. I bought tickets to concerts and plays. I lived as if I was making up for lost time because I was 1 month later, my phone lit up with Michael's name for the first time since I'd left. Dad, his voice sounded strained. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said, sipping a cold beer on my balcony as the sun set over the mountains. Things have been difficult since you left. The kids miss you terribly. I miss them too. They're welcome to visit anytime. A pause. Where exactly are you staying now? I chuckled. I have a condo downtown. Downtown? How can you afford? He caught himself. I mean, that's nice. Look, Dad, there's been some financial issues since you left. I bet there had been. Between my attorney's demand letter for the $100,000 repayment, the sudden responsibility for all their own bills, and what I later learned was Melissa's maxed out credit cards from their renovations, they were drowning. I'm sorry to hear that, I said neutrally. Dad, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have asked you to leave. If you want to come back, no thank you, Michael. I'm quite happy where I am. Another long pause. The thing is, Dad, we're going to lose the house if something doesn't change. The bank denied our refinancing application because of the legal claim you put on the property. That's unfortunate. Dad, please. We're desperate here. If you could just loan us some money until— Michael, I interrupted gently, do you remember your exact words to me that Tuesday morning? He went silent. You said, get your things and get out. Those words have been replaying in my mind every day. When I needed my family most after losing your mother, you and Melissa saw me as nothing but a convenient ATM. When you thought you'd extracted all the value you could from me, you discarded me like trash. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And here's something you should know, son. Your mother and I lived simply, but we were excellent with our finances. That $100,000 I gave you, it was less than 15% of our savings. I have more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. The shocked silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. In fact, I continued. I'm calling you from my balcony. I'm watching the sunset with a beer in hand. Next week, I'm flying to Italy. A trip your mother and I always planned but never took because we were too busy putting you through college and helping with the down payment on your house. Dad, please. As for your financial troubles, I suggest selling the house. My attorney tells me that once you repay the $100,000 loan, you should still have enough equity to downsize to something more appropriate for your means. You can't do this to us. Michael's voice had turned cold again. I'm not doing anything to you, son. These are simply the consequences of your own actions. You chose to treat me like a burden rather than your father. You chose to scheme for money rather than show love and respect. You chose to throw me out of your home. Now you can live with those choices. I ended the call and blocked his number. The next day, I finalized my travel plans. 3 months exploring Europe, starting with 2 weeks in Tuscany, just as Linda and I had dreamed of doing. The trip was transformative. Standing in the Sistine Chapel, staring up at Michelangelo's masterpiece, I felt Linda's presence beside me. We made it, my love, I whispered, ignoring the strange looks from other tourists. In Florence, I took a cooking class and learned to make pasta from scratch. In Venice, I rode a gondola and paid extra for the gondolier to sing love songs that brought tears to my eyes. I sent postcards to Emma and Tyler at their school addresses, bypassing their parents entirely. From each city, I wrote about the history, the food, the people, trying to give them a vicarious experience of the world beyond their neighborhood. I hoped the postcards would show them that life can take unexpected turns, but resilience and adaptability can lead to new adventures. In Rome, I met a group of American retirees on a similar journey. Among them was Dorothy, a retired librarian from Boston whose husband had passed away 5 years earlier. We bonded over our shared love of history and our stories of parenting disappointments. Her daughter had moved across the country and rarely visited, using her children as leverage to extract financial support from Dorothy. People say you're as happy as your least happy child. Dorothy mused one evening as we shared a bottle of wine at a trattoria near the Pantheon. But I think that's nonsense. I raised her, I loved her, I did my best. Her choices are her own now. Those words stayed with me for the rest of my journey. When I returned to Denver, I found handmade birthday cards from Emma and Tyler in my mail, forwarded by a neighbor who had stayed in touch. Inside Emma's card was a note. Mom and Dad don't know I'm sending this. Things are weird at home. They're fighting a lot and we had to sell the house. We live in an apartment now, and Mom keeps saying it's your fault. But I remembered what you always told me about taking responsibility for your own choices. I called Emma from a new number she wouldn't recognize as mine. When she answered, I explained who it was, and she immediately lowered her voice. Grandpa, I can't talk long. Mom would freak if she knew. I got your card, sweetheart. Thank you. Are you really traveling the world? I am. I just got back from Italy, and next month I'm going to Greece. That's so cool. Dad told us you were probably in some shabby apartment living on Social Security. I suppressed a laugh. I'm doing just fine. How are you and Tyler holding up? It sucks. The apartment is tiny, and we had to change schools. Mom had to get a job at Target, and she's always in a bad mood. Dad works all the time now. They still blame you, but I heard Dad telling his friend that they screwed up big time. Before hanging up, I gave her my address and told her she and Tyler were always welcome. Maybe when you're a little older, you can come visit me wherever I'm traveling, I said. I'd like that, she replied. Over the following year, I heard through mutual friends that Michael and Melissa had indeed been forced to sell their house. They moved into a small apartment and both took on second jobs to manage their debt. The Italian marble bathroom and designer kitchen hadn't increased the home's value nearly as much as they'd hoped, especially in a rushed sale. Michael tried calling me a few more times from different numbers, but the conversations always followed the same pattern. Initial politeness followed by increasingly desperate requests for money. Each time, I declined and reminded him that actions have consequences. As for me, at 68, I'm living the best years of my life. I've traveled to 12 countries so far. I've taken up photography and joined a hiking club. I've even met a wonderful widow named Claire who lives 2 floors below me and shares my love of classic films and Thai food. Claire, unlike Melissa, finds my stories interesting rather than tiresome. She laughs at my jokes and challenges my opinions in ways that make me think. On our 3rd date, I took her to a fancy restaurant, and halfway through dinner, she leaned forward and asked, "So when are you going to tell me what happened with your son?" I hesitated, embarrassed that my only child had essentially thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. "You don't have to," she said, noticing my discomfort. "But I've raised 3 children myself. I know that no relationship is perfect." So I told her everything. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. My second son didn't speak to me for 8 years because I refused to give him money for a business venture I knew was doomed. He came around eventually, when he matured enough to see I had been right. Maybe Michael will too someday. Maybe, I said, though I didn't hold out much hope. 2 weeks ago, I received an email from Michael, the first direct communication in nearly a year. It was short. "Dad, I don't expect you to respond, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. What we did was wrong. Melissa and I are in counseling now. We've been talking a lot about entitlement and gratitude. I'm not asking for money or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see what we did, and I'm ashamed. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure if I will. Part of me wants to rebuild some kind of relationship with my son, if only to have more access to my grandchildren. Another part wonders if this is just another manipulation tactic. Time will tell. Sometimes people ask if I regret the estrangement from my son. I tell them truth. I regret that Michael turned out to be someone who would treat his father with such callous disregard. I regret that he valued money over family. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret showing him that his actions have consequences. Most of all, I don't regret discovering that it's never too late to start a new chapter. My story didn't end when Linda died, nor when my son betrayed me. In many ways, that's when my story truly began. They say the best revenge is living well. From my oceanfront balcony in Barcelona, where I'm spending this month, I can confirm that's absolutely true. The end. If you like the story, subscribe to our channel and share your impressions in the comments. We try to post new stories every day.